All right, today we're going to learn about area and circumference of a circle. These you probably already know. The area formula of a circle is pi r squared, and the circumference is 2 pi r. Now, a little bit of background on these formulas. You probably have seen these formulas before. Sometimes you might get them mixed up, or you put a square there for circumference. But I want you to think about area being 2 dimensions. So it's always going to be in square units, and that's why you see a square for r. And circumference is a length around the circle. So that's always just going to be a number. It's not going to have a unit squared. It's just going to be a unit. It's always going to be measured in some sort of distance. So it could be inches, feet, miles, whatever unit of measurement that the problem asks for. A lot of people don't know why the area formula is pi r squared, but let's talk about circumference first, because now I didn't back this up with Google, but I've looked at it before, so I'm pretty confident this is kind of the process that evolved. The circumference of a circle was calculated. Well, actually, pi was calculated. It's easy to measure around anything. You can just take a string or tape measure or something and carefully drape it around a circle, and you can get an idea of how long it is. But they noticed that many centuries ago, they were always getting the same ratio of the circumference and the radius or the diameter of a circle. So what started off as, people measuring the distance around the circle, they're getting a circumference, and then they would measure straight across the circle. And by the way, that length is the diameter. And they were noticing that whenever they divided their circumference by the diameter, they always got the same number, okay? And that number approximately, was 3.14. It always came out to be about 3.14 every time they divided those two numbers. So it became pretty common acceptance that that ratio in any circle would always be true. And over time, as measurement got a little bit more precise, they were able to go out more decimal places. So, the area, I don't have my calculator in front of me, so let me pull up my phone for a second. Pi, goes out infinite amount of decimal points. So 3.14159, 26536, and it goes on forever. And the best computers have it to hundreds of digits. I don't know past the 159, to be honest, and I don't really care to know, but some people can go out further. Now, pi is considered an irrational number. Hopefully I spelled that right. An irrational number is basically any number that cannot be written as a fraction of two integers. So I couldn't write 22/7, even though that's the closest fraction. It's not exactly pi. So pi cannot be written as a fraction of two integers. So that's considered an irrational number, much like the square root of 2 or the square root of 5 or some number called e, which you may or may not have learned, but you'll learn it eventually. Pi is the same thing. So now where does the 2 pi r come from? Well, you got to keep in mind that r stands for radius. And in a circle, the radius is the distance from the center to the edge of that circle. So essentially, the radius is exactly half the diameter. So if you take your diameter and divide it by 2, you're going to get your radius, right? So if I modify that formula, 2 pi r, or circumference divided by the diameter is equal to pi. And if I solve that for c, sorry, that's kind of light there. Let me darken that in. Circumference divided by diameter is equal to the pi number that we got up here. If I solve that for c, I just multiply the diameter times pi. So you may have seen the circumference as that formula, pi times d. Well, what is d? d is 2 times the radius. So you could also say pi times 2r. Typically, though, the way that we would write that would be to put the 2 to the left of pi, and then the r at the end. We usually want to put variables at the end, numbers that are irrational before the integer or whatever coefficient it has. So that's the way you would write circumference. Now, where does this pi r squared come from? Well, that came later, but to get the area of a circle, you can think about taking a circle. Now that you know the circumference formula, and you can break it down into a bunch of little triangles. It's kind of boring doing all this, but all right, thanks for bearing with me on that. Now, if you take that and break it down, let's imagine you taking that circle and unwrapping it. So it looked more like a rectangle, I guess. So I could take like this triangle here, put it there. Then I could take the one next to it and put it here, and just keep overlapping them until they form as close to a rectangle as possible. It's actually going to be more like a parallelogram, but I'll let that pass for a little bit. Now what happens is, now I'm not getting all the triangles here because that would take a long time to draw. In fact, I don't feel like color coding it, so you'll just have to use your imagination and pretend every other line is, or every other wedge is blue, every other edge is orange, and you spread that circle out over a rectangle. What happens is, we know the area of a rectangle is length times width. Well, what is the width of this rectangle? It's going to be the radius. What is the length of that rectangle? Well, if you imagine this and that length, because we're flipping the triangles, would give you the whole circumference, right? So this would be half the circumference. Well, what is half the circumference? It's 2 pi r divided by 2, which is just pi r. Well, the area of a rectangle is length times width. So if I take that pi r, which is my length, and I multiply it by my width, which is my radius, well, r times r is r squared. So you end up getting pi times the radius squared. And that's where the area comes from. I could direct you to videos with better animations of breaking that down, but essentially what this is developed from the idea of limits and calculus, which you don't have to know advanced calculus to be able to know the formula, but that's where it does come from. So interesting information, whether you wanted to know it or not. I hope that helps you kind of remember at least what the formulas are, because a lot of math questions require to use circle formulas, and it's just assumed you know it because I know they teach you that stuff back to you in middle school, but a lot of people forget that stuff. So circumference is 2 pi r, or pi times diameter, and area is pi r squared. And don't be afraid of pi, it's just a number. It's approximately 3.1415, it goes on forever, but most calculators have a pi button, so there should be no reason why we can't just use that button and plug it in. Hope that little nugget was helpful for you. The next videos will actually have some problems to solve. Thanks for watching.